Hi guys, happy Friday. I hope you're getting ready for a great weekend with your family. By now you should have watched the first video on standard deviation called Standard Deviation Explained and Visualized. And so now I want us to give this a try and do some practice. So I'm going to use some of the data that he used in that first video that we talked about, and we're going to work the standard deviation, and we'll try to do it pretty quickly so you get some experience with a second practice problem. But if you want to take a look at this core concept, a measure, standard deviation is a measure of variation that uses all the values of a data set. Okay? You'll find this in your packet, this core concept, and I'm also going to post it along with this video in our Google Classroom. So the standard deviation of a numerical data set is a measure of how much a typical value in the data set differs from the mean. Okay? The symbol sigma, which is that funny shape, represents the standard deviation. It is read as sigma, so it tells you that. It is given by sigma equals the square root of each value in the data set minus the mean squared. Add it all together and divide it by the number of data, in the data set. So here it's represented as x1 minus the mean squared plus x2 minus the mean squared plus ... xn, right? Because we don't know how many are in our data set, okay? Squared, all divided by the number of numbers in our data set. Okay? So n is the number of values in the data set. The deviation of a data value x is the difference of the data value and the mean of the data set. So you're trying to find out how much each of them differs from the mean. So you're going to find the difference, right? And then you're going to square it and add them all together and divide by the number of numbers you have. So the first step is you're going to find the mean of your data set. To find the deviation of each data value, you're going to do x minus the mean. Then you're going to square each deviation. You're going to find the mean of the squared deviations. This is called the variance. And that's what we do when we add them all together and we divide by n. Okay? And then you're going to take the square root of the variance. All right? So I'm going to use the data set that was in the first video of the money in your pocket. So if you're walking around and you talk to 5 people, this is the different data that they have. That's the money in their pocket. So for just a minute, let's work this through, okay? I'm going to make a data table. I think that will be helpful for us to make a data table. And the data table is going to have the data. It's going to have, so I'm going to have my x, and it's going to have my mean, and it's going to have my x minus the mean, right? And then it's going to have my x minus the mean squared, okay? So my data is 21, 50, 62, 85, and 90. Okay? And in order to find the mean of that data, I have to add them all together. I have to get my calculator. So you guys know how to do this. You totally know how to find the mean. Whoops, hang on, I didn't do that right. I need to put it in parentheses, 21 plus 50 plus 62 plus 85 plus 90 divided by 5. Sorry. All right. So I got the mean as 61.56. So my mean is 61 point, actually let's just go 62, right? Let's round it for this purpose, okay? So for each one of these, my mean is 62. 62, 62, and 62, right? The mean is all the same, all the way down, okay? The next step, I'm going to take my data minus the mean. So 21 minus 62, and 50 minus 62, and 62 minus 62, and 85 minus 62, 90 minus 62. Okay? And finally, I am going to take the result of this and square it. Okay? So 21 minus 62 is negative 41, and I'm going to square that. 50 minus 62 is negative 12. I'm going to square that. 62 minus 62, that's going to be 0. 85 minus 62, that's going to be 23. And 90 minus 62, that's going to be 28. Okay, so I'm going to make that table, and then I'm going to square all of these. So I have negative 41 times negative 41, that's going to be 1,681. Negative 12 times negative 12 is going to be 144. 0 times 0 is 0. 23 times 23, I get 529. And 28 times 28, I get 784. So this is really just crunching numbers, okay? And remember, our sigma equals the square root of our data, right? Oops, minus square root of the whole thing over the number of numbers that we have in our data, right? Okay, and this is the square root of the whole thing, so it includes the square root of that n underneath there, so don't forget about that. So I need to add all these up because I've just figured out each of these inside of my square root, so I need to add all these up. So let's add those up. I get 1681 plus 144 plus 0 plus 529 plus 784, right? So this totals to 3,138. So my sigma, my standard deviation, is the square root of 3,138 divided by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So 3,138 divided by 5 is the square root of 627.6. So sigma, so I'm going to take the square root of that, 627.6. So my standard deviation is $25.05, right? So from the mean, or my average, the first standard deviation, right, is 25.05 on each side of my mean. So the bulk of my data with that rule falls in that area. Okay. Pause the video. I cleaned the board so we have a better view of our data. Hopefully you can zoom in on the data and see it okay. It says find the standard deviation of the ages for show A. It says in example 3, this is data that was in another example that we're bringing into this example. Use the table to organize your work and interpret your results. So remember, the table that we had set up on the previous one had the data, the mean of the data, then each data piece minus the mean, that's the difference, right? And then that quantity squared. Then we added those all up and took the square root of that sum divided by the total number of items that we have in our data set. Okay? So show A has all of these ages, 20, 19, 25, 27, 30, 21, 29, 22, 27, 29, 20, 31. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12 items in the data set. So your N is 12, right? You're going to find the mean of that data, okay? So if you haven't done it already, please pause the video and go ahead and find the mean, all right? So I have our solution down here for this problem. Hopefully you can see it. Maybe you can zoom in on it. So first you're going to find the mean. We talked about that. You're going to find the deviation of each data value, which is x minus the mean, right? So you're going to take each number in your data set and subtract the mean from it. Create your data table and enter those so that you can keep track of it, because it can become very, very large, a lot of things to keep track of if you don't create your data table. You're going to square each deviation, so x minus the mean squared. And then you're going to sum all of those. You're going to find the mean of the squared deviations. You're going to add them all together and divide them by the number that there are of them. And then you're going to use a calculator to take the square root of that, okay? All right, let me show you the data table, which is on our next page. Okay, so here's a data table. We have all of our pieces in our data set, and we have the mean of the data set. That should be the same all the way down that column. And then you have the data minus the mean, so 20 minus 25 is -5, 29 minus 25 is 4, and so on and so forth. And then you square it. And then you take the square root of those all added together divided by the number of them that there are. And you'll find your standard deviation, okay? So also on this item in our Google Classroom, I've posted a link to Desmos and how to calculate standard deviation and some other statistical items on Desmos, and I think that will be very handy for you. Once you learn how to do this and you have a large data set, you don't need to do this all by hand. You really need to understand what it is. You need to understand how to calculate it, and then you can also use some of our technology tools to do it for you. Okay? All right, I hope you guys have a great night.